Okay. Well, I think we'll go ahead and get started. I know we have some other folks that we're expecting, and I did hear from some folks that they would be joining in a little late, and I don't want to punish the punctual. So I do want to thank you all for joining our webinar today. As you know, we've been hosting these events for several years, and thanks to Zoom, we can at least do something online during this COVID pandemic. And I'm sorry we don't have lunch for you today. But we're pleased to have a great panel of presenters to help you learn about the fundamentals of advocacy and to hear about the issues that are critical for people with disabilities. We'll have some time for questions at the end of the session, and you can type those into this Q&A tab below at the bottom of your screen. And please remember that the purpose of this session is to learn in a respectful way how we can all be most effective and informed as advocates. This is not an appropriate venue for expressing political opinions unless they are related to the topic at hand. So please allow me to introduce our panelists. Senator Mark Stoops has served as a state senator for District 40, representing the Monroe County area since 2012 and up through the 2020 session. He has degrees from Indiana University and the University of California. While in the state Senate, Mark was a champion for people with disabilities and the programs that support them. He authored the Employment First legislation that passed in 2017, and that supports employment as the first and preferred option for people with disabilities in the work world. Hannah Carlock has served as the Director of Public Policy at the ARC of Indiana since 2018. Prior to that, she served as the Press Secretary for the Indiana House Republicans. She has a bachelor's degree from Ball State in Communications and Journalism and is currently serving on the board of Government Affairs Society of Indiana. Hannah's relationship in the State House on both sides of the aisle are a great asset to the ARC and all the constituents that we serve. John Van Buren has worked in the office of Representative Trey Hollingsworth since January of 2019, and prior to that for Senator Todd Young. He holds a bachelor's degree in political science and communications from Indiana University and a master's degree in political management from George Washington University. John provided assistance to Stone Belt as we sought relief funding through the COVID crisis, and also got his start here in the local office of then Representative Young. So we've known John for quite a while. Nicole Jorwak has been in the ARC of the United States since 2005 and currently serves as the Senior Director of Public Policy. She has a bachelor's degree from the University of Illinois and a Doctor of Law from Loyola University. She is an accomplished former executive director of a nonprofit and special education attorney who demonstrates her leadership abilities and commitment to public policy. She's been our go-to person in the ARC as it's related to the COVID bills, and I've seen many webinars with Nicole in the past, and she's very informative about what's going on in Washington. And I will comment that at the time I asked Nicole to do this, I thought she'd be talking about what had happened in Washington, and it turns out she'll be talking a little bit about what may happen in Washington. So we're going to start out with Senator Stoops, and each person is going to have about 10 to 12 minutes to kind of give you an overview, and I've given them some ideas of some talking points, and then at the end of our session we'll have some time for some questions. So go ahead and take it away, Senator Stoops.
Okay, thank you. I seem to have lost my picture, but I guess that's only of myself because you can still see me, right?
Yes.
All right. If I can pull it back up here at all. There we go. Well, Leslie, thanks for setting this up. I think you've asked me to talk about how constituents and groups can contact legislators. What's the best way to actually communicate with the legislator? And that's changed a bit for this year. But in general, the important thing is legislators need to hear your story. That's the most effective. So I'll give you an example. During the last budget session, we tried to work with Senator Mishler, who writes the budget from the Senate side. and we were talking about payments for direct care staff. So how do we get more money in the budget for direct care staff? And I can talk to Senator Mishler and describe the situation. I can talk about the need. I can make floor speeches about the need. But in the end, the most effective way or most effective way to actually get Senator Mishler to understand the subject was after the budget was passed, the hard numbers were in place, and advocates could go to him and say, listen, this is how this affects us. This is on the ground how this budget is going to affect us and the care we can give to the people we serve. And that it somehow flipped the perspective in Senator Mishler's mind so that he goes, oh, now I see how this is a problem. And really that's what advocates can do. You can meet directly with the legislators that represent you. Normally that you can go to the State House and meet with them, which is a very effective strategy. Many advocacy groups will set up days where people from the community can go and meet with legislators. But don't be afraid of a legislator. Legislators are just people that are up, they got elected to office. And by and large, they're all very friendly and they're very open to hearing from you and meeting with you. So if you go up to the legislature, go up to the State House and meet with your legislator, you'll have gone a long way to affecting how a legislator might think about a different subject. And the way to do that is just tell them your story. Tell them how what we are doing in the legislature affects them directly. And that is the most effective. Unfortunately, this year, that probably won't be the case. What's going to happen is legislators will be largely sequestered from the public. There won't be large meetings. You may be able to get individual meetings, and all that's still in the air because the session doesn't meet till January, so many things can change. So right now we're talking about how do legislators meet with lobbyists, how do the lobbyists interact, how do constituents interact. Another effective way to communicate with your legislator is just a letter, because we get lots of emails. I'll tell you that, we get tons of emails, and it's hard to track those. But a letter, a personal letter, can be effective because our staff gets a hold of the letter. We have a hard copy we can read in front of us, and that makes a difference. The groups that you work with are effective conduits for communicating with your legislator, and also be aware of when you have a third house in your district. So we have third houses. Many of the legislators, because their districts are so large, they can cover many, many counties, that they will pick something on an interstate. And I've noticed that many legislators in rural areas call them Cracker Barrel meetings, because there's always some Cracker Barrel that can hold a lot of people in some area where many people can attend from rural areas. And that's a way you can actually ask your legislators specific questions, direct questions, talk to them before and after the meeting, and be able to express what it is that they're doing or what you hope that to see them do. Always ask for some direct response. Is this something you will support on my behalf? Don't be afraid of doing that. Try to, legislators also don't understand every subject. We can't be experts on every subject, and disability services is a very involved and really complicated. The funding streams are complicated. The services provided can be complicated. Don't expect your legislator to understand all that. But what they need to understand is how their vote on a certain issue can affect that, what they should be aware of, and ask for their support. And let's see, you also asked, I'm not sure how much time I have, feel free to cut me off. You asked me to give you a kind of an overview of how a session works. So at what points can you affect legislation that you see moving forward? And typically a legislator will file a bill before session starts or in the first week of session, it gets assigned to a committee. And that's an important point for a bill. It gets assigned to a committee. At that point, you need a committee chair to actually approve to hear or agree to hear that bill. So that's a key point right there. Who is the committee chair on the committee that a bill has been assigned to? Contact that person as much as possible. Have as many constituents contact that person to tell them this would be an important bill for you, or this would be a bad bill for you. There's some part in it that would be good or bad for you, and let them know exactly what that is. Ask them to hear it if you really want them to hear it. Ask them not to hear it if you think it would cause you some problems. If the committee chair agrees to hear the bill, then yay, you've passed step one, and then it will be heard in a committee. So you have 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 people sitting there in committee hearing a bill, and you want to then at that point contact as many people on that committee as you can. So if you have constituents, look at the list of legislators on the committee, find out who supports you, find out who doesn't know enough about your issue, make sure they're contacted, make sure they know that bill is coming up before them and they have a chance to vote on it. Again, ask for their support of the bill when it comes to the committee. If you can get that bill heard and passed in committee, or maybe even killed in committee, then it will go to the House or Senate floor, depending on what side it was presented. And at that point, you really need some advocates. You need some legislative advocates that are going to stand up for that bill, and you'll have the author try to get as many people, if you have constituents of the legislators, get those legislators to actually sign onto the bill. So all they have to do is request to have their name added to the bill. And that shows that a bill has a lot of support. Also, it gets the legislator to pay attention to the bill. If they're signing on, then they should know some details about the bill. And then at that point, it would get voted on. So say if it is a Senate bill, it would get voted on in the Senate. It can be amended, and then it goes for a final vote, which is called the third reading. And if it passes out of third reading, then it would go to the House. And the House would have a similar procedure on their side. If the House finally passes a bill, then it comes over to the Senate. You do the same thing again. Gets assigned to a committee, contact the committee chair, ask them to hear it, ask them, et cetera, et cetera. Finally, it'll arrive at the end of session in some mangled version. Always pay attention to the details at that point. And hopefully at that point it can get passed and then sent to the governor to sign. Then that is the last step. Try to get the governor to support it and sign it.
All right, thank you. The one thing to mention is that our session in Indiana runs from January till March or April?
It'll be January till April this year.
Yeah.
So this is called the long session, and you'll be writing a budget. So this is an important year.
Yeah.
Especially if we all have funding needs, and I know you do especially. So this is an important year.
So that's a good way to Hannah, who's going to talk about her role in the Indiana legislature and how she can help you as advocates and what you need to know about the upcoming state budget cycle. So take it away, Hannah.
Thanks, Leslie. So I'm Hannah Carlock, and I'm the Director of Public Policy for the ARC of Indiana. And the ARC of Indiana offices are conveniently located right across from the State House in downtown Indianapolis. So from, as said, January to April in 2021, I'm going to be at the State House every day representing the ARC of Indiana. Now, unlike other industries, so let's just say the alcohol, the tobacco, the gaming industries where you can, go to a casino, they have lots of lobbyists. There aren't too many lobbyists in the State House for people with disabilities. So the ARC represents people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, but I also tackle things that deal with other disabilities as well. We deal with special education, so I do stuff within the school systems and classrooms and making sure people can get a diploma. We do workforce issues. We deal with Medicaid. We deal a lot with, attorneys and, trust. Like we have the ARC Trust in Indiana, and guardianship. So there's a lot of different areas that we cover. And on average, there are about 2,500 bills. So that's 2,500 bills that are drafted by legislators each session. So that's a lot of bills out there that, deal with roads, transportation, environmental stuff that I don't even understand. But the main focuses that I focus on are the ARC's bills and then other bills that affect Hoosiers with disabilities. So Senator Stoops and his colleagues get hit with all sorts of different things, and they're supposed to be experts, it seems, on everything that goes on in Indiana. So they rely on people like me that are in certain industries to really help them understand different bills, because there are bills out there that can be over 100 pages long. Like the state budget bill is very long. It's like 200 pages long. And for them to sit through and read all 2,500 bills is very, very hard. So that's why they come to people like me to see what's going on in the disability world within Indiana. And so that's why I need everybody's help so they can let me know what the issues are, so then I can work with people like Senator Stoops and other legislators to make sure that we get stuff done for people with disabilities, just to make everybody's life better. So that's my job in a nutshell right now. They are trying to decide at the State House what their jobs as legislators is going to look like, what my job as a lobbyist is going to look like next session, because we are in rare times during this COVID-19 pandemic. So we don't know if the House and if the Senate will be able to even host all 50 or 100 members, and just so that we can make sure that everybody's socially distant and can stay healthy. So we're there during the cold and the flu season, and we seem to be sniffling and coughing all throughout session because it's during winter and it's cold outside. But we really don't want to be passing around anything else, especially COVID. So we're trying to make sure that we can get stuff done for the Hoosiers in our state, but we want to make sure that we're doing it in a very smart manner. But next year is also going to be a census. So this year is the census year. So make sure you fill out your census. It happens every 10 years. So that depends on who's going to be representing you at the federal level, where John and Nicole are, also at the state level where Senator Stoops and myself work. And so the census is very important. It also dictates how much funding we get. So this next year is going to be a big year with redrawing the maps and seeing how many representatives are in the DC level, how much money that we're getting to help out all the needs that need to get across. So as Senator Stoops says, it's a budget year this upcoming year. The ARC's priorities are mainly going to be sticking to what we have in the budget right now. Everybody's going to be fighting over the last dollar, and since our state hasn't been having the revenues that we usually have come into the state, so people spending money in our state so that we have money to then spend on special projects like special education services, Medicaid, First Step services, paying direct support professionals, all of those things that we need to continue just to maintain what we have right now in our everyday life. We're wanting to stick to that. We definitely do not want to see, when budget cuts come, a narrowing of the door for people that can get on waiver services. We don't want to reduce the eligibility of getting those waivers. We want to make sure that we are spending our funds efficiently, since narrowing that door doesn't really help anybody, because no matter what you're narrowing the door, there's still people that need services. So we're just going to make sure that we maintain what we have in the budget currently and don't lose momentum there. We're also going to be looking at telehealth. So a lot of people are going to their doctors or therapists through what we're doing right now, Zoom calls, instead of being face-to-face in person. So making sure that people can continue doing that and be safe and actually getting the high quality health care that everybody needs. Rural Indiana, it's very hard to have reception in some places, Wi-Fi connectivity, or even devices like my phone, iPad, or any other kind of tablet or computer. So just making sure people do have the devices and the Wi-Fi infrastructure that we need for, virtual schooling, since a lot of schools have gone virtual, the telehealth, making sure that everybody, there's no hiccups in life, because this has put our society kind of on a hold and we're figuring things out. But we just want to make sure that everybody can continue during this odd time in our lives right now. So we foresee that being a major thing: education, telehealth, and just Wi-Fi connectivity. So if things change, that's going to be my major thing that we're going to be looking at. But if things change, you can always stay up to date with what I'm doing at the State House through the Arc of Indiana's website. So that is arcind.org. So you can go there, and there is a public policy tab at the very top part of the website, and you can find out who your legislator is. And when you're contacting a legislator, they want to know where you live, because as Senator Stoops said, there's a lot of different counties and areas that they represent. So they want to know where you live, because things might be different in Monroe County than it is in Morgan County. So they want to know where you live so they can better give you the best information possible to help you out. And they want to know your email and your cell phone number, your phone number, where they can reach you so that they can stay in contact with you about the issue that you reach out to them about. It's not like they're going to be calling you wanting money for a campaign. This is to help you with whatever questions you have for them. So you can find out who your legislator is on our website, arcind.org, and you can also sign up. If you click on that tab, there's a bullet point on there where you can sign up for the Arc of Indiana and the Arc of the United States legislative updates. So that's where Nicole and I can make sure that you guys are informed. We can tell you guys when we really need your help. I know Nicole's been doing great work when it comes to the stimulus packages and reaching out to your elected officials during this time of needing money within the stimulus packages. So if you go to our website there, you can sign up to receive emails from myself and from Nicole, because we definitely need your guys' help. Supported decision-making that we passed last year would not have happened without the support from the self-advocates of Indiana and family members reaching out to their state legislators. As Senator Stoops said, he's out there talking to legislators. I'm out there talking to legislators, but if somebody doesn't reach out to their legislator from their area of the state and tell them why it needs to happen for people, their own constituents, people living in their district, some of them don't understand that it's going to impact them. So definitely keep in touch with them about the different things that Nicole and I lay out in our emails to you guys. Also say thank you. They usually don't get thanked enough, especially John. He helps on that side of everything, fielding emails and calls for Congressman Hollingsworth. They definitely do let every representative that they work for know what is happening. They also don't get thanked enough. So thank them for their hard work and representing you.
All right, thank you, Hannah. I appreciate that. And thanks for all the work you do up in the State House, or whatever it's going to be this next year, the state Zoom, I don't know. So I think we'll move to John now and hear more about things at the federal level from a representative's office and how that all works.
Yeah, no, first, thank you, Hannah and Senator Stoops. You guys took a big chunk of what I plan to talk about too. I'll tell you a little bit about my role, but in a nutshell, it's to support decision makers like Senator Stoops, and the biggest part of that is relying on constituents' input, and a lot of times that comes from folks like Nicole and Hannah and Leslie. My role, I'm the legislative director, so Trey's got a team of folks based in DC that help him on a number of issues. We've all got portfolios, areas of expertise that we handle, and in Trey's office, issues related to what you guys care about most fall under my portfolio. So when Stone Belt or ARC have concerns, usually at the staff level, I'll be the first person to receive those, kind of synthesize all the great information they provide to me, and then bring that to Trey. Whenever there's a decision recently, as Hannah kind of alluded to, that has been in the context of the COVID relief packages. And we've had a few phone calls where I think Hannah and I have been on the same line, and she's been helping to educate me so I can pass that along to Trey. But I believe Trey, whenever possible, and I know Senator Stoops feels the same way, wants to be on those phone calls, talking with people, because like you said, you learn best when you hear directly from folks who are engaged in this every day. You guys are on the front lines with how you're adapting to provide the services that you provide all the time in this incredibly challenging environment, and hearing directly from you guys is it's invaluable. I mean, we get thousands. I mean, Senator Stoops talked about just the amount of people that he represents, and at the congressional level, at the federal level, each congressional district has about 750,000 constituents in it, and there's less than 20 staffers. So we are often trying to make sure that we hear all of those voices across the whole spectrum of issues to the best of our ability. And people like Hannah and Nicole and Leslie are great at making sure that we understand how things impact them, and just what degree we need to be involved in all these very complex and kind of disparate issues, right? I mean, these COVID relief packages are quite literally in the trillions of dollars and touch every facet of society. So hearing from folks about how this particular part of a very large 1,000-page bill affects them is invaluable, and we only learn those things at a really granular level through opportunities like this to talk with you guys directly. Whether that comes in the form of an email or a phone call or a voicemail. In-person meetings, as Senator Stoops alluded to, are a little tough, but the Zoom kind of helps bridge that gap a little bit when we can see folks and see and hear the passion for the work they have, and how these things affect them. So we have a particular bias for these kind of interactions in the time of COVID, because we feel like we learn more and we connect at a deeper level. But my role in the office is to oversee the whole legislative portfolio. Got great staff members, a lot of them Hoosiers, in fact, and we try and do our best to make sure we understand how these major big packages affect you guys. I'm going to check my list real quick, Leslie, to make sure I stay on topic here. You also asked me to talk about the difference maybe between the state offices and the DC offices. We work really closely together, but we have some great field folks in the district that when we're able to travel around and try and meet with you guys in person, they also help Trey connect with folks when we're able to have those kind of in-person meetings and visit with folks directly. I know he's visited Stone Belt and a couple other your partner organizations that you work with, Hannah, and those are invaluable. Pretty much right after he leaves, we get a call from him telling us what we have to follow up on at the federal level. But the folks on the ground, they're the ones that make sure that door of communication's open, because we're a couple hundred miles away in DC, so we want to make sure that we're knocking down those physical distance barriers as often as we can. So when you talk to the office, whether you talk to me, and Leslie knows this, I mean, we try and be as accessible as humanly possible. But if you talk to our state field team or the people in the offices there on the ground in Indiana, do know that those messages get through. I rely on them. The first thing Trey is going to ask me when any issue comes up is, what do folks back home think? What do we need to know from them? I don't usually get to step 2 if I don't get step 1 taken care of. So that's really important to Trey. And like Senator Stoops said, whether it comes through an email or a phone call, I mean, obviously, Hannah highlighted it. I think if you reach out, we want to know your phone number and we want to know your email, not so we can track you down for some other purpose. We're not actually legally allowed to do that. We want to know so that we can talk to you directly as many times as we need to hear the message and understand the issue for how it's affecting folks on the ground. And Trey, I mean, he gets a report at the end of every week about who writes in, but he's also incredibly involved. I mean, He calls people back personally from his phone. He's involved in responding personally. I've worked for several members of Congress, and Trey is just incredibly responsive. Again, he represents a lot of Hoosiers. 750,000 people is a lot, but he makes it a priority for us to get back to people quickly, to connect with them personally on whatever the issue is, and we do our very best to do that. So if there's something we can do better, please let us know. Leslie and Hannah and everybody knows how to get a hold of us, so please don't be shy, because we rely on you guys to make decisions for every issue, but especially these issues, like Senator Stoops said. I mean, you guys operate in a niche where maybe you guys are the top advocates, right? And we rely very, very heavily on what you guys have to say and all your materials. I think I'm signed up for Hannah's alerts as well, just to make sure I'm not missing anything. So it's very appreciated, but let me make sure I'm staying on topic here. Yeah, no, I mean, in the state, our state rep, I'll make sure I pass along this information to everybody, is Jason Cockerell. Again, I handle all the legislative issues, so we'll make sure you guys have her emails. But our website at hollingsworth.house.gov, the Contact Us tab, if you want to reach out to set up a meeting, if you just want to weigh in on a legislative issue. But like Senator Stoops said, it helps when you write in to say, I want you to support this particular bill or this particular provision of the bill, because we want to respond to you as completely as we can. And the more detail you impart in us on a note that you write, and especially if you take the time, like Senator Stoops said, to write out the note yourself and really put your personal perspective on it, that's invaluable. To be able to, as a legislator, I'm sure, go down to the floor and say, not just I had 10 people write in about this issue or 100 people write in about this issue, but to impart their personal stories, to be able to talk to your colleagues. I mean, the Indiana delegation at the federal level is 11 members, 2 senators and 9 members of the House. And to be able to walk up to your colleagues and say, folks in my districts are saying this very particular story, that's incredibly helpful to us. And it really, we work for you guys. Trey says that all the time. You guys are our bosses. So we want to make sure we have our marching orders down pat, and we only learn what's most important to folks when you guys reach out to us. So if I could leave any message, I just want to reiterate what Senator Stoops and Hannah already said is reach out early, reach out often. The process that Senator Stoops laid out at the state level is incredibly reflective of what happens at the federal level, as far as how a bill becomes law and the points that you need to be weighing in on. So the earlier you reach out in, it just helps us see further in advance where we need to be weighing in with our colleagues, whether that's chairmen and ranking members of committees, other members of the delegation, so that the whole federal Indiana delegation's aligned on issues that impact across the state, not just in any one member's district. So those are very important. But I think that was all on my list, Leslie, but I'm happy to take any questions as we keep going on.
So we'll go to Nicole here, and then we'll come back to questions. We've had a couple they submitted. I did want to say thank you to both Senator Stoops, and if you would please pass along our thanks to Representative Hollingsworth for being accessible to us. In both cases, these policymakers have visited with us when we've come to Capitol Hill, or have visited us at the State House, or have actually, both of them have come and visited Stone Belt. In fact, Mark on multiple occasions has been here. So we feel very fortunate that we have legislators that are willing to meet with us and hear from us. So at this, I'll go ahead and pass it along to Nicole, who's going to talk a little bit about the federal issues that are afoot right now, and what she sees as the most effective ways we can impact those.
Thanks, Leslie. And it was a pleasure to hear from Senator Stoops, and of course, love working with Hannah always. And John, nice to hear your voice. It's always funny because it's the new world e-lobbying, we're calling it now. So I've mostly just been doing phone calls, so it's funny to see people's faces. But for folks who don't know me that are on the call, my name is Nicole Jorwak, and I'm the Senior Director of Public Policy for the ARC. I'm one of the 5 members of the ARC's public policy team. And Hannah, it was when you were saying how there's so many industries that have so many more lobbyists, I was smiling and chuckling away, because that's often how we feel. And that is why it's so important that, as Senator Stoops said, that folks are telling their stories, because there's only 5 of us at the national office. We're so lucky to have such a robust network with folks like Hannah and Kim and Kim Dodson and Leslie. But it's really important that folks are hearing from their constituents specifically. But I'm very proud of my work and my role at the ARC. I've been with the ARC for over 5 years. I started as Director of Rights Policy. We are really lucky to have, as a disability organization, we actually are very lucky that we're actually have one of the biggest teams of disability organizations, and it means that we can cover a wide breadth of issues. I specifically cover a variety of issues, everything from Medicaid, home and community-based services, and Medicaid more broadly, direct support professional issues, criminal justice issues. I would have to look at a longer list, but and I, as the senior director, I support the rest of our team. But we cover, we have our director of income policy who covers Social Security and paid leave. We have our director of rights policy who covers housing and transportation and civil rights issues. And we have Julie who covers health, and Annie who covers education and fiscal policy. So ARC network is very well represented, and we're really lucky in that along those terms. We're also, on the national office at the ARC, on the policy team, our responsibility is to ensure that we have those relationships with federal legislators, again, relying on the broader network. We also do really focus on ensuring, too, that we have relationships with relevant staff members for the committees of jurisdiction around a lot of the issues that matter. Because of the wide breadth of issues that touch on the lives of people with disabilities, there's a lot of those committees. For me in particular, because of Medicaid, 2 main committees in the House. You wouldn't guess it by the name of the committee, but the main committee that oversees Medicaid is the Energy and Commerce Committee. And in the Senate, it's the Senate Finance Committee. And so it's really important that we have those relationships, both Democratic and Republican staffers, to make sure that we're having those conversations, especially, I'm going to talk a little bit more specifically about the COVID relief legislation that we've been seeing. Those are the conversations that I'm having late at night and over the weekends, making sure that the needs around home and community-based services and just broadly the needs of the disability community are being heard. We also obviously need to make sure that we have strong relationships with the federal agencies, and then also obviously working with our state and local chapters, making sure that all of our chapters have the information that they need. We're also getting information and stories from our chapters. One really great example of that was we had requests from the Senate there was 42 senators that signed onto a letter around the importance of Medicaid home and community-based services. So all those offices wanted stories. We gathered all those stories. Not every story obviously got seen, but there was one story that we collected from the state of Pennsylvania, and that story was read out loud on the floor of the Senate 2 days after the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And that's really important. And again, that puts the face to the story. It's not only at the constituent, it's a voter, and it reminds folks why these decisions are so important and why these votes are so important. And so also, obviously, at the national office, our role is to work with chapters, as I said, and make sure that we can also make sure that state chapters and local chapters have what they need to implement federal policies, and also share good state policies. So the supported decision-making work that has gone on in Indiana is a great example of legislation that can be held up as model legislation for other states. And so one of my roles as Senior Director of Public Policy is to be more active with our state chapters, which I really love because I come from the state level working at the state of Illinois around employment. And so it's just a really good way, and it's one of the many reasons why I'm really lucky to have close relationships with Anna and Kim and Leslie and others, because I get that opportunity. And one really recent and good example of why that's so important is obviously we have a lot going on right now in the face of the COVID-19 pandemic, and there's fires everywhere, for lack of a better term. And one thing that came up in late June, early July was the issue around retainer payments, and they were coming to an end. And it was happening in some states, and it was kind of a waterfall or trickle effect, because it was happening in some states and it wasn't happening in others, and then it all kind of came together at once. And we were able to, based on the relationships that I've been lucky enough to build with some of the folks within the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, also pulling together over almost 30 of our state chapters within a week, getting a meeting with Deputy Administrator of Medicaid, Calder Lynch, talk about these issues. And so that's just one kind of, as I was looking at Leslie's notes, it was just the thing that came to my mind of strength of the ARC network and strength of that local chapter, state chapter, national office that can come together.
Nicole, if I could just ask you, could you just briefly describe what a retainer payment is?
Oh, sure. Sorry. So a retainer payment was something that Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services have been approving emergency waivers. They're either 1135 or Appendix K waivers. And those are waivers that have been approved for generally actually in response to national disasters that CMS can get additional funding and additional flexibilities to states in provision of services, provision of Medicaid services. And one of those flexibilities was the provision of retainer payments, because we know that obviously day programs, employment services, other services were shutting down, and in order to ensure that we weren't losing staff and losing, obviously the only way to keep those programs open is to bill. And so that was what retainer payments are. Unfortunately, we don't have a resolution. I wish I had that great answer, but it was still a show of strength that we were able to get a meeting very, very quickly with a very really important person within the administration. And also that is a testament, because obviously we know that that folks in Indiana have strong connections to CMS Administrator Verma. And so there's obviously always an Indiana tie. And so anyway, that was just one really strong example that I wanted to bring up of why we're really lucky at the ARC, because what it ultimately does is make sure that it starts on the ground, what's happening on the ground, and we can get that all the way up to the folks that are in the decision making, in the roles of decision making. So that kind of brings me to a bit of a legislative update on COVID-19. I'm going to do it as quick as I can. It's hard to believe that this has been going on since, well, technically since March 11th was the date that the World Health Organization called COVID-19 a pandemic. There have been 3 large legislative packages that have passed. The first 2 were mostly related to health funding. The second package did include a FMAP, or federal match bump, so that's an additional 6.2% of federal funds that flow into state Medicaid programs. That's the main piece that kind of impacts our community. The third package, or the CARES Act, passed on March 27th, 2020, and that did include several provisions that assisted people with disabilities, but unfortunately not priority issues that we've really been pushing for. It did include some funding for something called the Provider Relief Fund that has been tricky with its implementation, to put it mildly. And we've been working with the administration on that. So that has been, in fits and starts, provided some support to provider chapters. It also has included PPP funding and the Paycheck Protection Program loans, and those were, some chapters were eligible for those, so those were beneficial to some chapters. It did include the stimulus payments. There were some hiccups with that. Some individuals, for a while, it was thought that individuals on SSI would have to file their taxes. Bethany Lilly, our Director of Income Policy, led a lot of the work around that, to work with the administration, the Social Security Administration, to iron out some of that. So luckily, not all that was fixed without any legislative intervention. There was also a short-term extension of the Money Follows the Person, or the MFP program. That is a program that provides federal funds to move individuals out of institutions or nursing homes and into the community. That was extended to November 30th in the CARES Act. So small pieces, but not the major pieces. So what are our major priorities that we're still really pushing for? The main one really is dedicated funding for home and community, Medicaid home and community-based services. We've seen, unfortunately, the real public health emergency that some congregate settings are posing. We know in Minnesota, for example, that 80% of the COVID-19 deaths have been in nursing homes and other congregate settings. And so at that same time, because of the underlying Medicaid law, I can't ever talk about any of this without talking about the underlying Medicaid law. The federal law, mandatory services include healthcare services. It also includes services like nursing home services and institutional services. I know in Indiana there aren't institutions, but in Illinois, in my home state, just across the border, there are 7. So that means that's where a lot of the money is going. That's a federal law. So states don't have a choice. Those are the things that have to be funded. Home and community-based services, so day programming, group home supports, those types of things are optional. And so we know that we're going to see, because we've already seen it in New Jersey proposed budgets, California proposed budgets, because of the stress that state Medicaid budgets are going to be under. States aren't going to have a choice again because of what's mandatory and what's optional. And so we need to see the funding go to these home and community-based services, or else all that's going to be left are those mandatory services that right now are proving to be very dangerous. It doesn't mean we don't need to make sure that people are safe and healthy in other settings, but we need to have that alternative of home and community-based services. And we also unfortunately know from package 2 that 6.2% FMAP, that was really helpful to stabilize Medicaid programs overall. That funding did not flow to Medicaid home and community-based services because it had so many other places where it was eaten up from. And so I'm very happy to report that there is very strong bipartisan support of home and community-based services. There always has been, continues to be right now. We're just stuck in a political quagmire. There's nothing else there's no other way to describe it. But I can say from all the conversations that I'm having on Hill with both majority and minority staff in the House and the Senate, there's a real understanding and a desire to put some fixes there. It's just going to be when we're working on it. So we need to work on a 4th package. As Leslie said at the outset, I thought when I agreed to this, I thought I'd be talking about the bill that passed at the end of July or the beginning of August. The House of Representatives did pass a bill, a very large $3.2 billion, a $1 trillion bill on May 15th. The HEROES Act, that did include the dedicated HCBS funding in Section 30103. It included a 10% FMAP, or 10% of the whole Medicaid spending. It would be dedicated specifically to home and community-based services. It also had some of our other priority issues, like ensuring that paid leave provisions are inclusive of grandparents and siblings and other folks, and making sure that adult dependents are eligible for stimulus payments. That passed the House on May 15th. The Senate introduced the HEALS Act on July 28th. It did not include any of our priority issues, except for it did include the adult dependent issue. It would allow for adult dependents to be eligible for that $500. But even the HEALS Act did not get called for a vote. Obviously, there were negotiations, or I shouldn't say obviously, for folks who haven't been watching the news closely, there had been negotiations that were going on with Senate minority and House Speaker Pelosi and the White House. That fell apart around in early August, and the President Trump signed 4 executive orders. The scope and legality of those is still up for question, and that's not my area of expertise, but those were in the areas of unemployment insurance, in rent moratorium, or eviction moratorium, not rent moratoriums, student loan payments, and payroll tax vacations, or whatever the correct word is. And so again, none of those touched on the issue areas that the ARC's priorities are, but those were a lot of the issue areas that were kind of a main part of the negotiation. And so what we anticipate, now the Senate adjourned on August 13th, they will they are scheduled to be back on September 8th. We will continue to put the pressure on. We just put out a big action alert around making sure that folks are, especially the Senate is hearing that they need to take action, because again, the House already did as of May 15th. And so it's going to be very important. September is going to be, I know that everyone's tired. We're tired too. But September is going to be a real make or break month, because we have package 4 that we still don't have any real resolution on. And then at September 30th, we also have a deadline of when the current continuing resolution or funding for the government ends. And so there's some rumors around combining them. We think we need to get action on the COVID bill quick. But anyway, there's a lot of things out there. I could keep going, and I won't. But just kind of giving everybody a little bit of a taste of what's out there. One thing that's good is that our priority issues haven't changed. And so the ARC has really, if you go to the arc.org/action, our action alert is on there. Again, we have a big team that's working on a lot of issues, but our action alert is only on our core issues for simplicity. It's on the HCBS funding. It's on the making sure that there's no barriers to stimulus payments and paid leave. And then we also have a storytelling tool. To go to back to Senator Stoops' original wonderful point around the stories. You click on it, you can pick, again, from our priority issues, HCBS, PPE, for direct support professionals, etc. Write your story, why that matters to you. So I'm a family member, I can write why my brother needs access to his direct support professionals. It's the story I tell all the time on the Hill. And then it automatically sends that story your senators and your representative. And again, that's what's really important, because these decisions are not just about dollars and cents, it's about people's lives. And so that's what folks need to know. And because that's what these decisions are about. And that's what we try to do at the national level, and what we're lucky to be supported with our wonderful state and local chapters. So I'll stop now and turn it back to you, Leslie.
So I just want to draw the line a little bit here, because we got people that are talking about federal issues, things that happen in Washington, D.C., and we got people that are talking about state issues. Those two things are connected, especially in reference to the financial situation that Nicole is talking about. The money in the CARES Act or the HEAL Act or whatever finally gets passed in the end, that money flows to the states. Our concern at the state level is, unless money starts flowing to the state specific for the services that we have, which are the home and community-based waiver services, unless that money flows to the state in some form or fashion, the state is going to be under pressure to cut. We're going to be under pressure to see our services cut, because the state is not going to have the resources it's dependent, that it's had in the past. Right. So this call to action is really important, and you can get on the ARC US or the ARC of Indiana on their website. Sign up for the email alerts. You can sign up for the email alerts from our page as well, our stonebelt.org, or join us, any of us, on Facebook, so you can get those alerts. And the more you can get that information in, the more you can take action. And it's simple. It really is simple. You go right to a page, and you can, it selects your representative or your senators for you, and it gets the message to them. Mm-hmm. So the more information, the more action we can take between now and the time whenever those final bills are determined, the better. And then when we get to the state legislature, and we'll be starting, to talk more about this at the end of the year and through the beginning of next year, we're going to need you really, really bad then too, because we need people letting the state officials or the state policymakers know how critical these services are.
It's also, I would be remiss also not to mention from the federal perspective, but obviously, as Leslie, you're stating, all of it, what happens in federal level is going to make decisions tough at the state and local level, is also what's going to happen after September 30th. It's probably going to be a little bit of a lull, because there's an election on November 3rd. But then after that, it's most likely going to be the most wild lame duck session, and the lame duck session is what we call this session after an election and before a new Congress takes over or a new administration, depending on what happens. And so be prepared for that too, because we're going to have the short-term extension of money follows the person ending. Who knows what else they're going to. We have, if they try to take up drug pricing, for example, permanent authorization of MFP or money follows the person was tied into that. So I just also want to flag that for folks that that's going to be coming.
A lot of voices needed ahead.
Yes.
That's what I'm hearing. All right.
Take a break
we,
in October.
we do have a couple of questions I want to be able to get to, and it looks like some of them got answered. Dan, you asked about having email addresses. We will send out a follow-up email to everybody, and we'll include all the contact information you all need to get in touch with any of our presenters, and also to figure out how to get, if you're not already, how to get these action alerts. We also had someone ask about if there's a situation that you're dealing with or a problem that you're dealing with, but there's really not a bill for it, do legislators, how do you talk, should you continue to talk to your legislators, and do they act on these type of situations? And Senator Stoops wrote back to Ann and said, it's a good time to let your legislator or the ARC know about the issues that could possibly be addressed by a change in laws. We have to file bills by December this year. So if you could contact your legislator or their staff and let them know what's going on, they might be able to get something drafted. And then Ann also asked about Appendix K, and Appendix K is that mechanism we have for the federal government to give the state some relief. Our particular state of Indiana did not choose to put a lot of financial relief into the Appendix K. So how could we have advocated differently? Could we have been more effective? And I'll open that up for Hannah or Mark or anybody that wants to comment. Are there things we could have done differently? And this is mostly an administrative, not a legislative issue, but.
Yeah, I mean, that would have been just a decision with the state Medicaid office. So Hannah, I'm not sure what happened there.
Yeah, so Nicole's right. So this was more, and so was Leslie, this was more of an agency administrative action instead of legislative. So the state budget agency in Indiana denied the request that DDRS, so Medicaid and the Family and Social Services Agency had included for their financial support to provide to providers of Medicaid services across the state. We did see sustainability grants that were approved for providers during the summer months, and optimistic that they will continue for a few more months, if not through the rest of the year. We were really disappointed in seeing the lack of support that we received for the Appendix K funding, but ways that you guys can help with that is by letting your legislators know about this, because this was, at the end of the day, an administrative decision. So the governor has to sign off on this, and he's doing whatever the state budget agency suggests. So if we're reaching out to our state representatives and senators and educating on them about this situation, they meet with the governor, they call the governor, and if more people are contacting the governor telling them, hey, well, this is a bad thing, we really need to provide the Appendix K funding, then we could have gotten it through possibly. So we're still in the middle of our DSP crisis. That's even worse than during the pandemic, and getting their stories out there is huge. So just sharing your personal stories about this and tug on those emotional heartstrings really helps us just across the board with this.
Yeah. So before we close, I do want to remind people that one of the best ways you can advocate is to vote. And so I hope all of you are registered, that you're planning to vote. I was hoping we might have a little more time to talk about voting, but I do have information, at least for Monroe County folks, that you can go to monroecountyvoters.us/home, and you can get information about your voting situation in Monroe County. Indiana, you have to have a valid reason, and I'm not going to go, I don't know what they all are, to do absentee voting, but if you are, if you meet one of those reasons, you can do absentee voting. If not, I would suggest that you look at early voting or other mechanisms for making sure that you get your vote in. That's going to be extremely important that we have an active and engaged population of people voting, and being able to express some of your support for disability issues and other ones that you care about through your vote. So I want to thank our panelists for being with us today. I appreciate it. I think it was a great discussion, great information. This stuff, there's a lot of weeds in this stuff, but really the first thing, the most prominent message that you should get out of this is contact your legislators. Find out who they are. You can go to Stonebelt or the ARC or the ARC-US, the ARC of Indiana or the ARC-US, and you can find out who your legislator is on any of those pages and start getting in touch with them. And I bet they're pretty used to, John, you probably get issues that you have to refer back to the state, and Mark, you probably have to get issues that you refer up to the federal. They'll help you sort it out. So just do it. You'll learn it as you go. And we need your voices, and we do appreciate that you've been here today to learn more about it. And again, one more thanks to our panelists, and thanks to everybody who joined us today. And I hope this has helped you feel engaged and excited to go out and make a difference. Bye-bye now.